Okay, so we're back. Now let's look at some of our answers from our word list here to complete the sentences. So the first one is done for us. Number one, I have to make a list of all my homework. Okay. Number two, I have to finish this. I wrote down paper by tomorrow morning. Number three, it's hard to blank in this noisy room. I said concentrate. Concentrate. It's hard to concentrate in this noisy room. Number four, I really need to be a more blank reader. So for this one, I wrote active. Active. I really need to be a more active reader. Number five, I need to look up the new blank in the dictionary. I wrote vocabulary. Vocabulary. I need to look up the new vocabulary in the dictionary. Number six, I will write the most important information on blank. I chose index cards. Index cards. I will write the most important information on index cards. Number seven, this book is blank. I can't read it. I chose boring. Boring. This book is boring. I can't read it. Number eight, I feel blank because I never know all the answers. I wrote discouraged. Discouraged. I feel discouraged because I never know all the answers. Okay? So hopefully we got the same answers. If you think that maybe you have a different answer that's correct, let me know and we can talk about it, right? Because some words might fit in the spaces as well. Some other words, right? You might have said, I have to finish this list by tomorrow morning, right? That's okay, right? That works. So let's talk about it, all right? Let's move on. Let's look at number five. Okay, so we have to be careful here. That's why I underlined this, right? Mark an X next to the bad study habits. Right? So far, we've been talking about good study habits, things that would help us to be able to study better, right? But now we're going to put an X next to the bad study habits. Okay, so put a check mark next to the good study habits. So what I did, I just put an X next to the bad study habits, and I left the other ones blank because I didn't want to confuse the two. All right. So for my answers, what I did was I put an X next to the bad study habits, and I left the good study habits blank. All right. So let's read through these, and let's see what I got. So the first one is done for us. Doesn't study new words. That is a bad study habit. Is late for class. That is a bad study habit. Hands in homework late. That is a bad study habit. Makes to-do lists. That is a good study habit, so I would have left that blank. Forgets homework That's a bad study habit. Doesn't or does not study for tests. That is definitely a bad study habit. Writes new words on index cards. So that is a good study habit. So I would have left that blank. And underlines the main ideas. That is a good study habit. So I would have left that blank as well. So these are my answers. And hopefully we got the same. All right. Let's move on to number 6. Number 6 is listen. Then check the statements that are true. All right. So what we can do is take some time and scan this barcode here and listen to the conversation between Amelia and Mr. Wilson. All right. Then let's go back and check the statement that is true. Okay. I put an X by the statement that is true. So that would be my check. Okay. But let's take some time, pause the video, and listen to this conversation between Amelia and Mr. Wilson. And then we'll come back and we'll answer this question. Okay, so hopefully you've had some time to listen to the conversation. So let's answer the question. Amelia thinks Mr. Wilson's strategies are crazy. I don't think that happened, right? I think that's false. Mr. Wilson thinks that Amelia is not a very good student. I don't think that's true. So that one is false. Mr. Wilson has talked about learning strategies in class. That one I believe is true. All right, so this is the one I marked as true. All right. Hopefully you got the same thing. All right. So let's move on into lesson B. All right. So this is, again, review unit number 2. And we're going to go into lesson B. Before we get going into lesson B, though, let's talk about the present perfect tense. All right. So in this unit, we're going to be talking about present perfect tense. So let's remind ourselves what it is. The present perfect tense, or the present perfect, is a verb tense which is used to show that an action has taken place once or many times before now. The present perfect is most frequently talked to. The present perfect is most frequently used to talk about experiences or changes that have taken place. But there are other less common uses as well. Okay? So for our purpose, we won't use the less common uses. We will just talk about how the present perfect tense is more frequently used to talk about experiences or changes that have taken place. All right? So, present perfect tense talks about things that happened in the past. Okay? And it could have taken place one time or many times in the past. Okay? So this is how I visualize it when I'm thinking about the present perfect tense. All right? So let's look at this a little bit deeper. The present perfect forms. All right? The present perfect is formed using has or have. This depends on who or what you're talking about, right? I have, you have, we have, they have, right? And he, she, or it has, right? So the present perfect tense is formed by using has or have plus the past participle verb, okay? Questions are indicated by inverting or switching the subject and have, right? Depending on who you're talking about or to. Negatives are made with not. Okay, so let's look at an example. Let's look at an example. Statements, right? So present perfect statements. You have seen that movie many times. Okay, you have, that makes sense, right? You have, plus the past participle, seen. That's the verb in the past participle. Seen that movie many times. Okay? Question. This is how we form questions. Now, when we do questions, we are inverting or switching the subject and have. So before, have would have been first and then our verb, right? Now we're switching it. Have you seen the movie many times? Have you seen that movie many times? Okay, see how we switched it now. You have you. And then the last one is negatives. Negatives are made with not, right? So you have not, or in this case, haven't. You have not seen that movie many times. Okay, so all we do here is add our not between have, has, or have, has, and the past participle verb. Okay, so if we look in our student book, if we look in our student book on page 20, okay, we've done this already, right? We can look at our present perfect and then our grammar focus. So what they want us to do, what they want us to do is to start using how long, for, and since when we're using our present perfect tense. All right? So let's look and see how they want us to do this. Use how long plus our present perfect tense to ask about something that started in the past and continues to the present. The answer, how long, questions use for with a period of time, for instance, 5 months, and since with a specific point in time, for instance, Monday. Okay, so to answer how long questions, use for, all right, with a period of time, for 5 months, and since with a specific point of time, a specific point in time, like Monday, since Monday. All right. So let's look at how we ask questions. How long has Alex lived here? How long has Alex lived here? Let's answer that. He has lived here for 2 years. He has lived here, here's our for 2 years. For and a period of time, 2 years. Let's look at our next question. How long have you known Alex? How long have you known Alex? And our answer is, I have known him since January. Okay, I have known him since January. Since, use since with a specific point in time. Okay, since January. So remember, we're going to be using our past participles, right? So regular verbs, they're really not, past participles are not really a problem with regular verbs, right? We have live, and the past participle is lived, right? Wait, past participle is waited. Work, past participle is worked, all right? However, when we look at irregular verbs, that's where we might run into problems. So this is where we need to practice, right? So irregular verbs, be, which is very, very popular and the most used verb in English, the past participle is been or been. Have, had. Know, known. Speak, spoken. Teach, taught. Okay? Let's talk about time phrases, right? So we use these time phrases when we're talking about using either for with a period of time, like 5 months, or since with a specific point in time. For instance, Monday. All right? So let's look at the fors first. For 2 hours. For 1 year. For 5 months. Okay? Let's look at since. Since 6 p.m. Since February. Since last year. Okay? So now that we've gone over that with present perfect tense, using how long for our questions, and then for or since for our answers, let's continue on. Also, before we continue on, actually, you can also scan this barcode to watch a brief video that explains this a little bit more. Okay? So, if you need to, please pause the tape, scan your barcode here to get a better understanding of present perfect tense using our past participles. Okay? And paying special attention to irregular verbs in the past participle. Alright? So if we go back to our workbook, we can turn over to page 20. Alright, we'll keep going with page 20. Let's look at number 1. So we can always study the chart and explanation on page 121 in our workbooks, right? For a list of irregular verbs, turn to page 130. Study the chart explanation for present perfect on 128, and then for a list of irregular verbs, we can turn to page 131, and this will help us to practice our irregular verbs in the past participle tense. Okay? So the directions for number 1 is circle for or since. Are we going to use for 2 weeks or since Thursday, for instance? Okay? So the first one is done for us. I have known Elsa for 2 years. Okay? So let's take some time, pause the video, and do 2 through 8, and then we'll come back and we'll go over this. Alright, so let's pause our video and do 2 through 8, and then we'll come back.